I want to start with a new number on vaccinations that just came in. Last week, we set a new vaccination record of 10,500 doses in a week. We have now smashed that record. This week, we have delivered 14,600 vaccinations. Thank you, everybody who has come out to get vaccinated. To the update on cases. There has been one new positive case recorded in the Northern Territory overnight. It is a 31-year-old, fully vaccinated Aboriginal female from Robinson River. As a close contact, she was transferred to the Centre for National Resilience on Wednesday and has tested positive in quarantine. She was not infectious while in Robinson River. As such, there are no new exposure sites for this cluster. I want to update you on one of the positive cases from yesterday, the 59-year-old female. I can confirm that she was fully vaccinated, which is great news. She lives alone, and while she is an in-law of a positive case, at this stage, there is no link that we can establish for the infection, which does deepen the mystery a bit. We'll keep working on that. Our investigations continue. At this stage, there are no new exposure sites. To testing and contact tracing. There are 3,083 tests processed in the Territory in the past 24 hours, and just the one new positive case that I have mentioned. 512 tests were taken in Katherine, and 230 tests were done in Binjari. Every resident was tested there yesterday. I thank the Binjari residents, Worley, our rapid assessment teams for your incredible work in the past 36 hours. From when the gate was closed on Thursday night to when the testing team arrived at dawn yesterday and all through the day, we had people in full PPE gear all day in 42-degree heat, right up to the last test arrived at the lab at 2 a.m. this morning. You did a brilliant job. Thank you. That is an extraordinary effort. We're getting all those tests processed as quickly as possible today, and I hope to update you on those later. Remember, we had a positive wastewater test at Binjari on Thursday. We have retested the wastewater and it's a stronger positive now. So we are expecting to find at least one positive case in that community. But it is in lockdown, just like the rest of Katherine. We also sent a vaccination team to Binjari yesterday with 47 jabs, mainly first doses. NT Health administered another 55 doses in Katherine yesterday. The close contact numbers now stand at 355, a reduction from 373. 345 have been identified and contacted, so we are missing 10. 290 negative results have been returned so far. We have done more wastewater testing throughout the Territory. There is one new development from the wastewater that does concern us. There is a weak presumptive positive that has shown up in the Marlow Lagoon catchment. We are getting that retested now. We did have a couple of close contacts in that catchment, so that might be the explanation, but we'll keep monitoring it. It's not a cause for alarm just yet. But obviously, if you have symptoms, you should be getting tested, and that's important for everyone in Palmerston. If you're symptomatic in Palmerston, please come forward and get tested today. We still have that Marara testing facility open and ready to take you. Based on what we know, we have made the decision to end the territory-wide mask mandate today. Katherine and Robinson River are still in lockdown, so that includes the mask rule for them, so they still have the mask rule in place. We have new mask rules in place for recent arrivals in low-vax remote communities, but for the rest of the Territory, the masks can come off now. So this is a pretty good day. We are feeling a bit more confident, but we are not complacent. We are feeling better today about the chance of relaxing lockdown in Katherine and Robinson River from Monday, but I want to flag with people now, that does not mean we go straight from lockdown to no restrictions. The most likely scenario is stepping out of a lockdown into a lockout for a period. That means only people who are fully vaccinated can move about the community while we finish up the testing and tracing. As always, being vaccinated is your best bet to be safe and to be free. Speaking of vaccines, the vaccination rollout right across our remote communities has really gathered pace in the last week, and I want to thank everyone who has rolled up their sleeves in the bush. AMSAT is reporting the first dose rate among our ARCHO-controlled communities has jumped about 9% in the past week, and as much as 21% in some communities. That's huge. The NT Health first dose figure for remote Territorians is now at 77% and really starting to move. Based on current trends, this will crack 80% next week, which means we will be double dosed 80% for the remote area by the end of the year, and that is huge. Thank you very much. Before I pass on to the Chief Health Officer, while we have been dealing with the outbreak this week, We've also been working on our plans for home quarantine from Monday and other arrangements to help keep the Territory safe. I will go through those changes now. There is a fair bit of detail, so I'll need your patience. This weekend marks the conclusion of our month-long pilot of home quarantine for fully vaccinated arrivals from red zones. We did a pilot first with 111 people across Darwin and Alice Springs, so we could see what worked and what didn't work to inform our next steps. Following the home quarantine pilot, our original intention, as part of our roadmap towards more freedoms, was to then expand home quarantine to all fully vaccinated arrivals from red zones before moving to no quarantining by early next year. Today, we're announcing some positive changes to the roadmap, bringing forward our timeline to ending home quarantine while introducing some stronger rules to keep the Territory safe. I'm going to go through each of these changes one by one, and I'll take some time to explain why we are making them and why they are the safest and smartest options. To the first change. From Monday, we are requiring all arrivals to the Territory, no matter where you are coming from, to be fully vaccinated. Previously, if you're arriving from a green zone, you didn't have to be vaccinated. On Monday, that route is closed. Our current outbreak has reminded us that COVID can come from anywhere, which means we have to be more vigilant. It tells us that dishonest, unvaccinated people from green zones are more of a risk to us than honest, fully vaccinated people from red zones. As you know, the genomic sequencing confirmed that the outbreak we are dealing with in Katherine and Robinson River originally came from the person who arrived from Queensland a few weeks ago, the person who had been in Victoria but hadn't told us. It was easy for this to spread because as an arrival from a green zone, there was no requirement for this person to be fully vaccinated or take a COVID test when she came to the Territory. She was not fully vaccinated, she had not taken a COVID test, but she was allowed into the Territory, and she spread COVID. She didn't mean to, but she did. If we had stopped her from entering the Territory based on her vaccination status, or if we had tested her on arrival, there would have been no spread of COVID-19. COVID would not have made it into Katherine. It would not have made it into a remote community. We wouldn't have an elderly Aboriginal woman in hospital on oxygen right now, and a 3-week-old baby would not have the virus. No outbreak, no lockdowns, no lockouts, no masks, none of it. This has all happened because someone who wasn't fully vaccinated came here with COVID and we didn't know about it. We have been asking Territorians to do the right thing and get vaccinated, and Territorians are responding brilliantly. It makes no sense for Territorians to do the right thing and get the jab, only for us to keep letting in people from interstate who have not yet done the right thing. And from Monday, we are ending it. This does not apply for people who cannot get vaccinated, like children under 12. There will be an exemption for unvaccinated returning NT residents, for very limited essential personnel and some compassionate grounds. But these people will still have to test and isolate on arrival. For everyone else coming from green zones, if you are eligible to be vaccinated and you are not fully vaccinated, you are no longer welcome in the Territory, no matter where you are coming from. Be vaccinated like us. If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice, but you no longer get to choose to bring yourself and your risk to the Territory. That's the first change. Now to the second change, and it's about home quarantine. From Monday, we will begin 7-day home quarantine for fully vaccinated arrivals from red zones. The pilot of 14-day home quarantine has gone well. People have been complying, taking the tests, and there obviously haven't been any positive cases from that. It has reinforced for us that while these people are coming from high-risk areas, because they are fully vaccinated and getting regular tests, the risk can be well managed, and the risk after the first week is negligible. Keeping fully vaccinated people from red zones in home quarantine for 2 weeks would not have stopped our latest outbreak, but stopping unvaccinated people from coming to the Territory or taking a simple test on arrival at the airport probably would have. After vaccination, COVID testing is our best weapon in the defence of the Territory. Our pilot program has taught us that so long as arrivals from red zones are fully vaccinated, get tested before they come here, and get tested again after they arrive here, the risk of spread in the Territory is very low. Until now, mass testing on arrival has not been a viable option because rapid antigen testing was not available at scale. Now it is. This week, we have set up rapid antigen testing distribution points across the Territory for people going into low-vax remote communities. And from Monday, rapid antigen testing will be stood up at all Territory airports that receive interstate flights, as well as available in regional centres for arrivals by road. From that point, fully vaccinated travellers arriving from a red zone can undertake 7 days of home quarantine under the following conditions. You must have returned a negative COVID PCR test within 72 hours of coming to the Territory with proof of the result. You'll be required to take a rapid antigen test on arrival at the airport or at the first regional centre or distribution point if travelling by road. And you'll be required to undertake your 7 days of home quarantine in a high vaccination zone. Currently, that will be Greater Darwin and Alice Springs. The quarantine location must be a house, unit or apartment, hotel or Airbnb. You will get tested again on day 5 during your quarantine. You will get another test when you exit home quarantine on day 8. You are then free to move about, but for the following week you must stay inside the high vac zone and away from the following high risk areas: aged care facilities, healthcare facilities, except as necessary, correctional facilities or remote communities. You are then tested for a final time on day 14. Like the pilot, you will be required to use the Good to Go app and stay in a location that has reliable 4G coverage. Like the pilot, people in home quarantine can stay with others in a household so long as everyone is fully vaccinated and those people don't have to quarantine. Unlike the pilot, these people will no longer have to get tested as well. This is because we are now confident that the testing regime for the person quarantining is solid enough and regular enough that we can isolate any household contacts extremely quickly in the event of a positive case. So you can host someone who is home quarantining and you can keep going about your life, you can keep going to work, sorry, you have to go to work, as long as you are fully vaccinated. As I said earlier, we require people to show proof of a negative COVID PCR test taken within 72 hours of arrival in territory. If you don't do this, you will have to go into supervised quarantine initially, or we'll do a PCR test for you. So it's easier if you get it done before you come here. I know it seems like a big step to go straight to 7-day quarantine. This is something we have studied very carefully. The fact that we'll now be able to rapidly test people on arrival makes a big difference to the risk matrix. Remember, before a fully vaccinated person can even enter home quarantine, they will need 2 negative test results, one before they arrive and one as soon as they arrive. The data on international arrivals coming to New South Wales has shown that people who test negative on arrival, there is only a 0.14% chance of a subsequent test being positive. That's why we are testing them again while they're in quarantine on day 5, then again when they leave on day 8, and then one more time while they were in the community on day 14. 5 tests in total and 7 days of quarantine. If you are a returning Territorian from a red zone who is not fully vaccinated, you will continue to be granted an exemption to come here, but you have to undergo 14 days of supervised quarantine at your own expense. As usual, there will be an exemption process for an extremely limited one for essential personnel and compassionate grounds, but again, it's 14 days of supervised quarantine. If you are not a returning Territorian, you are eligible to be vaccinated and you are not fully vaccinated, then you don't get to come to the Territory. If you arrive at an airport, you'll be fined and put on a plane home. If you rock up at a road border, you'll be turned around. No ifs, no ands, no buts. You are locked out, end of story. So that's the big 3 changes starting Monday. Stopping interstate arrivals who aren't fully vaccinated, rolling out rapid antigen testing, and moving to 7-day home quarantine for red zone arrivals. I know this isn't the exact roadmap we set out initially, but as everything we do with COVID, things can change quickly. We learn more about it every day. And like other governments have done in recent days, we are updating our plan to make sure it still works for us. I hope that Territorians can see that these changes will make us safer and stronger while getting us to where we want to go quicker. The ability to now rapidly test people on arrival in the Territory is a game changer. It gives us an extra layer of protection. It gives us the confidence to start moving away from home quarantine. That brings me to my final bit of big news. 7-day quarantine is scheduled to run for a full month like the pilot did, to make sure everything works and to test our systems. During that time, we will work on increasing our rapid antigen testing capability at our airports and regional centres. And then, from the 20th of December, we will roll out rapid antigen testing for all arrivals into the Territory. Every single person who comes to the Territory will get a rapid test done when they arrive. And because of that, we will no longer require fully vaccinated arrivals from red zones to quarantine. There will still be a testing regime in place for arrivals from red zones, but home quarantine will end a month ahead of the plan and 5 days before Christmas. As always, the plan depends on getting these steps right. But so far it's worked. In fact, it's gone better than expected, and we are making our system stronger as we learn more. I know some people will say this is weakening our protection. That's wrong. By the end of the year, the only people allowed to enter the Territory will be people who are fully vaccinated, who get tested as soon as they arrive. That is strong, that is safe. There will be some special interest groups that say this is too dangerous or too reckless, like they always do. I would just say, look at our record. We have kept the territory safe. Now we are keeping the territory safe while also getting the territory open. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Thank you, everyone, for coming again. So today is clearly another good news day. So we only have one further case, but I must warn people to expect more. I don't expect a great increase, but I do expect to see further cases. I should also alert people that there have been a number of people that have moved out of Katherine and around the territory and out of Robinson River who are contacts. Chief Minister has mentioned that. We still need to remain alert. We still need to keep focused on getting tested. It's very, very important in this phase that anyone who's symptomatic, please come forward and get tested. I'll come to Palmerston in a minute. Also, vaccination is clearly our way out. It's extraordinarily pleasing to see the vaccination rates last week. We've broken all our records last week. Thank everyone for coming forward, for doing that. I'd also like to, while I'm on it, acknowledge the enormous efforts of staff again. They are literally working around the clock. They're tired, but they're delighted. You can imagine how they feel when they're being so successful with their work. In relation to Marlow Lagoon and the presumptive positive, I should make clear that doesn't meet the criteria for a positive. However, our experience is that presumptive positives most likely do turn into positives. So we do need to keep an eye on that. So again, I would urge people, as the Chief Minister has said, to come forward if you're symptomatic. Please be alert in those areas. Come forward, and the testing capability is there at the Marara Stadium. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Some pretty good news today. However, I've got to speak to particularly those in the lockdown areas. Please understand that we still need your support. Unfortunately, in Katherine yesterday, 16 infringement notices were issued for failure to comply with the CHO directions, and a further person was charged in relation to that as well due to their behaviour. These issues range from leaving the lockdown area outside of the 5 reasons to be outside, not wearing masks and congregating. So again, please be compliant in that space. Your police force is working very, very hard to try and limit the movement around the place, trying to support Binjari, supporting the RAT teams. There's lots of work going on, so please don't be the distraction. We've got just too much on our plate without having to deal with that sort of stuff. To Robinson River, again, compliance is going really, really well. The community and interoperability is going well. I spoke to our sergeant on the ground yesterday. Particular shout out to the CEO of Mungabata, who's been exceptional in working with the agencies on the ground and being the bridge with the community. It's been fantastic. I believe the store is looking to open to make sure that there's some further accessibility around, but we've been supplying additional support to people, particularly with infants. The testing regime, the vaccination has really gone very, very well, so credit to them. Binjari, nearly 42, 43 degrees was apparently the report yesterday of our staff on the ground. That's a mix of health staff, of public servants, of fireys, of police officers, full PPE, moving through that community and getting some outstanding results there, and vaccinations up and running. So I just have to commend the efforts of people across the board in this response. It has been enormous. It's a service above self approach, and people are just doing exceptional things, and the community is responding, which is fantastic. So a great credit to all of those people involved. As has been indicated, Marara testing facility will be ongoing over the weekend to enable an increase in testing through Darwin, just for that surety that we are all continuing to look for. And those clinics will continue to provide that support, so please go and get the test if you feel you've been in those places. There's lots of moving parts still going on, but for the broader part of the territory, enjoy the lifting of the mask mandate. But again, Behaviours, particularly for the protest this afternoon, should be lawful. We're always supporting lawful behaviour and lawful protests. So again, please just do that respectfully and everything should travel along quite okay. As we move into the future, you can see that there's been lots of plans put in place. The Emergency Operations Centre has to be acknowledged for the work they do, particularly in the downtimes. That's when all of the planning is undertaken, and we constantly refresh those plans commensurate to the changing journey that COVID has taken us on. And the response out to Robinson River, Binjari and certainly Katherine is a great testament to all of those planners. So they're often forgotten as being the true heroes. The fact of the matter is they're making life for the people on the front line far better by going through all of these relevant scenarios and putting in appropriate contingencies to deal with these issues and keep people safe. Enormous effort to date, but the job's certainly not done. Please keep being compliant and keep helping us to help you. Thank you.
So Chief, a few months ago we phased out rapid antigen tests for staff at Howard Springs. We were told they aren't the gold standard, but now it's the pillar upon which much of this plan sits. What's changed?
Yeah, so PCR is still the God test, number one test. If you test positive to a rapid antigen test, that triggers a PCR test. What rapid antigen test gives us is the ability to do mass testing at scale quickly as a screen. So it doesn't trump a PCR test at all. So PCR, where it's necessary in all those healthcare settings, quarantine centres, we're still using PCR. And Dr. Payne can talk to this in a lot more detail if you like. What we have now is the ability to use RAT testing as screening. And so Doherty modelling showing this, for example, how you might approach a school that has a positive case and how you use RAT testing in the school context. So it's more about doing quick screen tests and then triggers a reaction with a PCR test. Do you want to add to that, Dr. Payne?
I suppose it was quite contentious, if you recall, at the beginning when we ceased the rapid antigen testing in CNR, but that was a quite different phase and a quite different purpose. At that time, we were most concerned about a high-risk venue and staff who were in close contact, and we could not tolerate, the risk tolerance at that point for false negatives was very low. In this phase, we're in a completely different situation. We've got much higher vaccination rates, and we need to have the rapidity of mass testing. So it's a quite different scenario. It may seem confusing that we have switched, but it's a quite understandable logic of what we've done.
Can you give us an idea of what constitutes a red zone, a yellow, an orange zone, and a green zone? What's determining those designations?
Yeah, so red zones we've done as hotspots throughout the whole of this pandemic. Basically, it's where there is evidence of community transmission. Where there is transmission on a widespread scale, we have introduced hotspots, and therefore these will be the red zones. And the green zones are where we have a comfort that there is low risk of transmission. At the moment, we have a number of hotspots, and we have a number of green zones, effectively. In other words, those jurisdictions where there's no community transmission.
So where do people go if they test positive when they come to the border from a red zone, if they're double vaccinated?
So that would be the two supervised quarantine areas remain the top facility and the Centre for National Resilience, and police will manage that process. We have done in the past about how you get from the border point to a quarantine centre.
And how does our supply with RAT tests? Do we have deals in place with multiple suppliers? Or?
Yeah, so we're very confident on our ability to have and source rapid antigen testing. So we did that work leading into the remote community decision around below 70s and setting up the centres in Alice, Katherine and Darwin, and that's given us the confidence a lot more broadly at the rapid antigen testing infrastructure for the airport setting, and then giving us more confidence around that movement.
With the whole staying in a high vaccination area for the week after you exit home quarantine, is that something that's going to be phased out over time? Will, for instance, for tourists coming interstate? So
that'll be something we keep looking at, and I think we've shown we're prepared to keep looking at things and make evidence-based decisions. So that's the current rule, and we'll keep looking at it. I can give you that confidence. I can't give you I couldn't give you a date range, but to put some risks in perspective, the risk in the first week is around 1 in 700 that you test positive after the first test, and 1 in 14,000 in the second week. So that's why the first 7 days is much more the focus than the second 7 days. And it's just, obviously in a high vax area, about double vaccinated people in a high vax area, it's basically copable, if that makes sense. If that's a word, copable. But yeah, we feel comfortable there. It's just those high-risk settings we want to avoid at this stage, but we'll keep looking as the evidence comes in.
The Prime Minister said on Thursday that we shouldn't have two classes of Australians. We shouldn't have one set of rules for vaccinated people and another for unvaccinated. You're obviously not taking that advice on board.
Well, I don't think any evidence backs that up.
How's the 65-year-old woman doing? Is she ventilated yet?
So my understanding is that she's still stable and on oxygen. Like, we obviously ask every morning about her status to pay attention to it. And so while stable on oxygen, that's 4 days now. And I personally feel for her, and I understand the other gentleman's also stable, but I might just ask Dr. Payne to formally advise that.
Yes, we have been, again, advised of her condition this morning. She's stable, but as I said yesterday, she has moderate to severe COVID. She's getting maximal treatment. She doesn't need ventilation. We only ventilate as a last resort. If you recall, also I mentioned she has had one dose of vaccination, so that's giving her a degree of protection we expect. We're obviously keeping a close eye and hoping she gets better soon. We have one other patient in hospital as well from this outbreak.
Dr. Payne, I know we're not out of the woods yet, but given the huge spike we've seen in vaccinations, was this the COVID outbreak that we had to have?
Well, we would. It's clearly the silver lining, in a sense, from an outbreak of this kind, but the risk of something like this getting out of control is just too great a risk for us to take. So we're not celebrating in that sense at all. We all feel, and I don't want to say we're out of the woods yet, we all feel we've had a close shave again. The potential was very clear. We were most lucky that Robinson River had such a high vaccination rate, and that's where it spread in a remote community. In Katherine, our vaccination rates are not enough yet, and I'd like to repeat our appeal for people to come forward for vaccination in Katherine. There were some very good vaccination uptake numbers in Binjari, so we can see, we know that can happen. Appreciate the community welcoming those teams and taking up on that offer. We need more of that to happen, please.
Are we seeing a spike in vaccinations as well in Central Australia and the Barclay?
Yes, we are. We've had some very encouraging communications from Congress, for example, in Central Australia, from Dr. John Buffer, and they actually had to ask for more vaccines from the Commonwealth because they were running out. So a great uptick in vaccination rates. There are still some communities where there is some reluctance, but I won't name them, but there is particularly one community where they know that there had been some contacts had travelled from Robinson River, and we're seeing uptake as well there. So that's very encouraging.
How likely is it that we'll find the missing link between the two parts of this cluster, given the time that's passed since that first sort of couple of cases?
Yeah, it's a good question. We can't be certain we'll find it. Obviously, we're looking very closely for that, and with both with our contact tracing teams, but also with the help of police, to see if we can find that link. I suppose the important thing to realise that even if we don't find that link, with the lockdown, with the vaccination rates, with the testing, and the comfort that we're getting from the widespread testing, together with our wastewater testing, we will be able to have comfort whether or not we've got it under control, even if we never find out where that link actually is, although of course we know genomically they're linked.
Are you saying that you're confident that this outbreak will be eradicated?
No, I can't say that yet. No, and I don't want anyone to relax at this point. We can't, none of us can relax. We must persist with this hard. We are entering a phase where we'll be able to make a judgment as to whether we can do some easing, but we are not going to suddenly relax.
Your language around the cans woman this morning was a little more forthright than prior. Are you considering further action against her given the scale of this outbreak?
Well, that's something for the Commissioner to look at in terms of whether there is ability to take up other charges. Obviously, the breach of the trade direction is straightforward, and that'll just be a body of work for the Commissioner to look at. I don't know if the Commissioner wants to touch on that. You've answered that before, but yeah.
You go.
Bringing the roadmap forward, obviously, a positive change has been brought forward by quite a lot. What would this mean for overseas travel?
So our international rules follow our domestic rules, so the same rules for both sets.
Have there been any other additional health measures in any of the remote communities around Katherine that aren't Binjari?
So obviously, Katherine area is in lockdown, so Binjari is already in the lockdown prior to the wastewater. And we've also been testing all the wastewater. All that wastewater was negative, so it wasn't necessary to do other measures that make sense. And so if you're outside the Katherine lockdown area, maybe Borroloola is the best example. Borroloola is very close to Robinson River. Borroloola has had a good testing rate within Borroloola. They've done a reasonable vaccination response. The wastewater is negative, so Borroloola is not in lockdown, no mask mandate, etc. So we've done the work necessary to give us the comfort that it's Katherine and Robinson River where we need to keep our attention. And obviously with the wastewater result in Binjari, we are expecting there to be a positive case, but we've got all the measures in place that would see the virus trapped there and for us to be able to deal with it.
The Commissioner raised the prospect yesterday of restrictions on alcohol in Katherine because of antisocial behaviour. Has anything come of that?
I'll pass to the Commissioner. Obviously, the police are discussing that with the Director of Licensing about whether it's necessary or not, and they're keeping an active eye on that. The Commissioner did touch upon it this morning.
Again, with everything that we've been doing on this, we want to try and be commensurate with our moves. So the discussion has been had. We moved into it more of an enforcement role yesterday. I think everyone can see we've tried to be very upfront about trying to educate people. It's only that small group of people that have continued to push the boundaries, and we want to make sure that the community isn't punished as a result of the behaviour of the few. I think the Territory is pretty familiar with that type of behaviour and is a bit over it, to be upfront. So we targeted those individuals today. We expect far better behaviour today, but the Director of Licensing is ready and willing to help us if we feel that that's the mitigation we need to have. But you know, we understand the community of Katherine are trying their best to the large proportion of people, and I really thank them for it. But for those who keep pushing the boundaries, our patience has been tested, and now we're moving into the enforcement model.
You confirmed yesterday that there are a number of businesses that were being looked into by anti-police. Do we have a progress on those or any outcome?
Yeah, again, when we're diving in, all are looking to be compliant with the show directions, which is a positive thing. We know there's lots of rumours and innuendo running through, but the work that's been done so far, where we've been going in and checking, we're seeing compliance, which is very pleasing.
Where's your investigation in relation to the threats that were made against the Chief Minister and his home address being shouted out at a rally?
That's ongoing. I won't add any further to that, but suffice to say that behaviour is completely intolerable and not one that we will accept. So we're continuing to work on that and see that investigation through.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.